Hello, friends. Good morning, and welcome to another live stream here at Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Vaddha, and today I'll be leading the live stream, giving some Dhamma reflections. So I hope that you're all having a good morning or a good evening, whatever time zone you may be in. Be listening to some Dhamma before work or staying at home today to practice. So I'll say hello to some of the folks that are joining in. We have Alyssa, Rebecca, and Geeta. Hello. And I'll put the link to one of the suttas that we'll be looking at today. I don't think that we'll be going through the entire sutta. We're going to look at a part of it, and we can talk about that. So hopefully that works here. And hello to Miguel and Bhumika. And so I thought that maybe we can start with just 5 minutes or so of meditation. Put this here. So I'll just put this up in case anybody joins. And we can just take a few moments to settle in and take a few deep breaths. I think it'll be helpful for the talk today if we settle our mindfulness a little bit. So we can go ahead and close your eyes. Or if you'd like, you can leave your eyes open. And just take a few deep breaths. Just letting the mind know that this is a time to settle. Letting go of the thoughts and the memories and the movement from what you were doing before. And on the next breath, just settling back into the present. And with each breath, letting go then of the future, what you might be doing after this. And settling back into the present. And another breath just to clear any fogginess or too much thinking that's going on right here in the present. And settling back into more still awareness. And then we can just let the breath flow naturally. We've been breathing our entire life, and most of the time, our breath doesn't need us to do its job. So we just let go, let the breath flow, and we just allow the mind to know the breathing. It can be helpful with each breath also to notice any tension, whether in the head or in the mind or somewhere else. Just noticing any tension and gently allowing it to relax and settle. Not forcing, but just bringing that noticing, that awareness there along with the breath, and allowing any tension to settle. It can be helpful to notice any silence or stillness in the mind, and just allow the mind to settle in that peace, that silence. If you can find it any between thoughts or in the mind. And now, before we close, I'll just ask everybody to please notice whether your eyes are open or closed. Please just notice that faculty of seeing, bringing your attention to the seeing, just like the breath. So not getting involved, relaxing, and just noticing seeing, the process of seeing. And then please turn to hearing. Can you notice any hearing? Whether the instructions that you're being given or hearing any noises. Turning the mind towards the faculty of hearing without getting involved. Just silently knowing and noticing, exploring this experience of hearing. And then please turn your awareness towards thinking, towards any thinking that might be occurring in your mind. Whether thinking about this meditation or thinking about what you're hearing, thinking about the past, future. Just notice that thinking process. What is going on there? How is it working? What is the mind doing there? And finally, we'll do the most difficult. Please turn your awareness towards the very knowing itself, towards the silent, clear awareness. Awareness in your heart or mind, the awareness of the outside. Please try to notice this awareness. Understand what it feels like without being involved in it, without entangling the mind in it. Just this knowing. And we can then take just a few more deep breaths, and you can gently open your eyes. If you'd like, you can keep your eyes closed during the Dhamma talk. And I'll just say hello to some folks who joined us in the meantime. Hello to Amaranta, Maria, Karuna, Sara, Nico, Jayanta, Mariel, Somin. So I'll go ahead and start now. I'll say homage to the Buddha, the traditional way in Pali 3 times, and then I'll begin speaking. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay. So just during the meditation, for those of you who were joining in, that was just to try to give you a little bit of an experience of the topic today. So last time that we were here together, I spoke about the Attagavagga, which is a chapter of ancient poems, ancient Buddhist poems, called the chapter of octads. And I thought that we could discuss another sutta from there, at least the concept of it, but open it up a little bit. Instead of just reading the sutta, we can kind of pick out one aspect of it and then we can explore that. And so the meditation that we did today is related to that. But before we open it up, I figured we can just read through this. So this is called the Shorter Discourse on Arrayed for Battle, the Chola Vyoha Sutta. It's again, this is for those who don't know, the Attagavagga is one of the oldest collections of poems in the Buddhist canon, and it is set in the culture of the Buddha, the culture of debate and philosophical speculation and argument, and many different people propounding their own doctrines, right? So very much similar to now, because now that the West in the world has become much more globalized, we're exposed to many, many different ideas, right? You might hear many different ideas from religious people, from your family and friends, from the internet and social media. There's a lot of different ideas, right? Politicians. So everybody has their own view and everybody else is wrong, right? Only that person is right, or only that group is right, whether it be Buddhist or someone else, right? So we all tend to have these views and we stick to them, we formulate them, and we believe other people and we get angry at other people who don't agree with us. And so that's what this is about, right? In the time of the Buddha, there were many different views and there was a broad atmosphere. People were allowed to have those views and they often debated them, just like today, right? Just like people argue today. So I'm going to go ahead and read the sutta and hopefully you'll get a little bit of a flavor for this, but just understand that that is the background, right? Each maintaining their own view, those who are skilled disagree, arguing. Whoever sees it this way understands the teaching. Those who reject this are inadequate. So arguing, they quarrel, saying the other is a fool, an amateur. Which one of these speaks true, for they all claim to be an expert? If not accepting another's teaching makes you a useless fool lacking wisdom, then they're all fools lacking wisdom, for they all maintain their own view. But if having your own view makes you pristine, pure in wisdom, expert and intelligent, then none of them lack wisdom, for such is the view they have all embraced. I do not say that it is correct when they each call each other fools. Each has built up their own view to be the truth, which is why they take the other as a fool. What some say is true and correct, others say is hollow and false. So arguing, they quarrel. Why don't ascetics say the same thing? The truth is one, there is no second. Understanding which, folk would not argue. But those ascetics each boast of different truths, that's why they don't say the same thing. But why do they speak of different truths, these proponents who claim to be skilled? Are there really so many different truths, or do they just follow their own lines of reasoning? No, there are not many different truths that, apart from perception, are lasting in the world. Having formed their reasoning regarding different views, they say there are two things, true and false. The seen, the heard, or the thought, or precepts and vows. Based on these, they show disdain. Standing in judgment, they scoff, saying the other is a fool, an amateur. They take the other as a fool on the same grounds that they speak of themselves as an expert. Claiming to be an expert on their own authority, they disdain the other while saying the same thing. They are perfect, according to their own extreme view, drunk on conceit, imagining themselves proficient. They have anointed themselves in their own mind, for such is the view they have embraced. If the word of your opponent makes you deficient, then they too are lacking wisdom. But if on your own authority you're a knowledge master, a wise person, then there are no fools among the ascetics. Those who proclaim a teaching other than this have fallen short of purity and are inadequate. So say each one of the sectarians, for they are deeply attached to their own view. Here alone is purity, they say, denying that there is purification in other teachings. Thus, each one of the sectarians, being dogmatic, speaks forcefully within the context of their own journey. But in that case, so long as they are speaking forcefully of their own journey, how can they take the other as a fool? They are the ones who provoke conflict when they call the other a fool with an impure teaching. Standing in judgment, measuring by their own standard, they dispute with the world more and more. But a person who has given up all judgments creates no conflict in the world. So that's this discourse here. And you'll notice, this is a little bit, sometimes some of these can be different from other Buddhist teachings, because this also applies to Buddhism, right? We also, in Buddhism, it doesn't mean the Buddha isn't saying that everyone else who says that they're right and everyone else is wrong, that doesn't apply to his own people. It also applies to Buddhists, right? We also need to be careful about our views and how we relate to them. And that's not to say that there isn't a truth, because here the Buddha says the truth is one, there is no second, right? So this may seem contradictory, it may seem confusing, and I think this is why this is worth discussing, is because on the one hand, the Buddha is saying the truth is one, there is no second. And then on the other hand, he's criticizing all these people who say that they're right and everyone else is wrong, right? So what does that mean? And what is the correct way to hold a Buddhist view, right? So he gave some indication here, and this is what we've talked about last time. It says the seen, heard, or thought, or precepts or vows. Based on these, they show disdain. And this is a famous scheme. The seen, what we call ditta, the heard, what we call sutta, and the thought, mutta. And then there's also two more. We've done one today, which was knowing or understanding. This is vinyata. And then there's precepts and vows, silabbata. So in the time of the Buddha, and just as much today, usually when people hold a view, they're basing it on something, right? So it might be because they've seen something or they've seen someone. So maybe someone says, oh, my teacher is so pure. I've seen my teacher. You haven't seen him. You haven't seen her. So you don't have the right teacher. You don't have real purity. So based off seeing someone, maybe they see someone very inspiring, and based off that sight, then they think that they've been purified, or they think that they're superior just because they've seen something. That's all. And then they think they're better than other people. Or maybe they hear something. And in this context, it also means learning. So in the time of the Buddha, obviously most of these were not written down. So when they say hearing, they also mean learning. So this would include reading today, actually, even though reading is seeing. But hearing things, hearing other ideas, and then maybe we accept that. So someone else tells you something, and you think, oh yeah, that seems reasonable. And so then you accept it. And everyone else who disagrees with you, you think they're an idiot. You think they're a fool because they don't have the same view as you, right? Or other people in the world, right? They know something, and then they think everyone else is a fool because of what they've learned or what they've heard. And it might not be very true, right? Maybe they've just heard, oh, all of those people, they're like that because it's their karma. They're bad people, bad karma. And so just because they've heard that, they feel superior. But they don't know that, right? They've just heard it, and then they feel better about themselves. So that's another example of hearing. And then there's thinking, mutta. This is sometimes they're misunderstood to mean the sensed, seeing, hearing, and the sensed, but it doesn't mean the sensed, actually. It's a misunderstanding. Mutta is a form of the verb manyati, which means just to think up. It always means to think. And this means when we think up ideas through logic or through trains of reasoning, right? So this is also common in the time of the Buddha, and it's also very common now, right? So maybe someone thinks up something, you think up a theory. This could also be something like a conspiracy theory, right? And people believe it. And then they tell the people, they hear it, and then they believe it. Or maybe they see something and that confirms their view. So these kinds of theories and ideas that people build up, religious, political, etc. Mutta, thinking, is a big one, right? And this can be just normal thinking. It can also be logical argumentation, right? So someone might tell you, they might try to argue through logic that something is the case, right? And then the other one, so vinyata means knowing or understanding. And this could mean something like meditation. So maybe, again, someone may see something in their meditation, and then they think that that's the truth, right? So someone may see a light, and then maybe they think that they've seen God. This is a basic example, but it can be many different types of things. So, or it can also be understanding or knowing in general. Like, there's a difference between thinking something and then that feeling of knowing something, right? So this is the feeling of understanding. Like when the mind understands, it can be mundane as well, but kind of drawing inferences and that feeling of understanding something in the world. So vinyata is this deeper knowing, whether through understanding of worldly matters, or it can also be knowing in the sense of like a deeper awareness developed through meditation. And then the last one here, silabbata, this means precepts and vows. And I don't think we'll go into that too much today, just because it's a little bit too much, too many topics. But this is also, for example, the Buddha talks about this. Maybe some people, they do certain vows and precepts and rules and observances, and then they feel that that makes them pure and others are impure. So an example of this would be, by doing certain bowing, by doing certain chanting, we become pure. Everyone else is not pure. But that is just that's just doing an observance and then claiming that is purity, right? And then you get into disputes with the world because other people disagree with you. So because of holding these views, any of these views that we develop, because of treasuring them, then other people challenge us, or we challenge other people, and then we get defensive, right? It hurts when people say something that we don't agree with, especially if it's a deeply held view that we've been convinced is the case. And so here, what the Buddha is doing in these teachings is he's trying to analyze that, right? So one, he says, for example, he kind of describes a scenario, right? When we zoom out, what do we see? We see people who are arguing, each saying that they're right. And so then he draws out the implications of this, right? Because he says, if not accepting another's teaching makes you a useless fool, then they're all fools, because they all maintain their own views. So none of them accept the other's teaching, right? So if not accepting what someone else says makes you a fool, then everybody is a fool because everybody says something else. And so they don't accept what the other person says. But then he says, well, if having your own view is what makes you knowledgeable, then everybody is knowledgeable because everybody has their own view and they're different views, right? So we can't have it both ways. Either other people are wrong and we're right, in which case everybody would be right because everybody thinks that they have a different view from someone else, or everybody is right because they all have their own view. And the Buddha says that he doesn't say that that's correct, right? Because he says the truth is one, there is no second. And so what that means here is really that for the Buddha, the truth is beyond these views, right? The Buddha talked about letting go of views. And for the Buddha, the truth is something beyond that. The truth is understanding views themselves. So there's a very famous sutta. It's the very first sutta in the canon, the Buddhist canon. It's called, in the Theravada canon, it's called the Brahmajala Sutta. It's called the prime net, or the net of Brahma. And in that sutta, the Buddha says that other people, they might praise the Buddha, they might praise Buddhism, we could say, because of the morality and the virtue that he upholds, right? So the Buddha had very pure behavior, very pure conduct. And he said that other people might see that, and then they might praise the Buddha because of his pure conduct, his pure behavior. But he says that that is not how he should be praised, that is just what common people praise him because of, but that there's something deeper, something much more profound, which he has realized, and that is what's really praiseworthy. And in this sutta, what is the deep thing that's praiseworthy? It says that what the Buddha really should be praised for is that he understands views, and he understands how they arise and how they cease in the path to their cessation. And he understands the gratification, why people like views and what they get out of them, the danger of views, and he also understands the escape from these views, the different views that arise in the world. And this, the very first sutta, that says that is what the Buddha is really worthy of being praised for. right? Which is interesting because in this case, the Buddha is not being praised for his particular view, right? Like, oh, Buddhists believe in this. That's what makes them special. Rather, it says what makes the Buddha special is not a particular view that he holds, but that he understands how views arise and how they cease. So he understands the mechanism of views, right? Not the contents of the view itself. And so this is also describing the mechanism. So he says that based off of what people see or what they hear or learn or what they think up, or maybe their rules and observances, and elsewhere also what they might be aware of or know or understand, based off of that, they formulate views and they think of themselves as superior. So the Buddha's ability here is that he's able to discern this is the basis for that view, and then we can examine the structure of our ideas and learn how they arise and how to let go of them to be free from all kinds of arguing and disputing, right? And I think that this is where there's this connection, this meeting place between our meditation practice, our mindfulness practice, and our calming mind practice, and also our life as spiritual practitioners in a world with many different opinions, and sometimes it might seem opposed. I think it can seem like we do meditation and we do this, but then there's also all these other views that we dispute with the world or other people argue with, right? There can be this tension. And for the Buddha, there's not a tension, right? So for the Buddha, Buddhist practice is about understanding how the mind creates these opinions, creates these ideas, and latches onto them, and then defends them and argues them or feels superior or inferior because of them. And so when we did our meditation today and we looked at the process of seeing, then we can start to understand through our mindfulness practice how seeing works and how seeing something doesn't make us pure, right? It's just an impersonal process. So when we see a holy image, when we see a holy person, when we see a auspicious sign, that's just seeing. It's nothing more. It's just seeing. And it doesn't make us pure. It's just seeing. And so we need to understand that, right? Because it's very natural for us to get caught up into the process of seeing. And then we start to formulate this grasping and we build a sense of peace and security out of the safe feelings that can come from holding views. And this is what the Buddha talks about as well. So we experience these different things. We formulate views and opinions about them. And then we feel good. We feel safe. And so we latch on. We want to hold to that. And the Buddha calls that unstable peace. Very unstable, right? Someone else says something and we feel very defensive, very threatened. So, or we find counter evidence, right? That makes our view seem not so likely. And then we either deny the evidence or we feel very, very threatened, right? So another example of this, maybe someone believes that the earth was created 6,000 years ago. And when scientists start finding rocks that seem older than that, very, very painful, right? Very hard to accept that reality. And they either, maybe that person feels very, very threatened and they hide away and they form their own group where they think that they're the only ones who are right. Or maybe they feel very lost and confused in the world now that their view is gone. So that's just one example. And this, again, I don't want to generalize to one group or anything, because I think this applies to all of us. So what we can do to be free from this tangle of arguments and confusion, and also how we can develop our own mental clarity using our meditation practice to aid that, is we can start to understand how the mind comes to develop views, how it comes to develop understanding, and what the Buddha considered the right way of building understanding, because he didn't deny understanding. He did not deny truth, right? The Buddha did use meditation. He did teach specific things, right? He didn't say nobody's right or we can't know anything. That was not his view as well. So there is a proper way to develop knowledge, but we need to understand that. And we need to understand where we are on the path, and when is something a view that we're holding, when is something an opinion, and when is something leaning more towards knowing, right? It's very important to make this distinction, because if we think we know something, but we don't actually know it, that is a real danger, right? Because that is basically saying that to that extent, we can't grow, right? If we think we know something already, Then anybody who corrects us, we just think they're wrong. Anybody who disagrees with us, we think they're an idiot. And we can't get any better because we already have that amount of knowledge, right? If that's what we think. So thinking that we know something is very, very dangerous when we don't actually know it. And then less dangerous, but also important to recognize, is when we hold a view, we hold an opinion and a theory, and we hold on to it and we protect it very deeply. That is also dangerous, but it's much safer if we just understand that it is in fact a view. Right? We do have to use views on this path, right? We have to hold to right views. We have to discriminate between and discern between right and wrong. And for many people, that will not be a matter of knowledge. It'll be a matter of faith and confidence and experimentation. And so we have to understand where we are on the spectrum of knowledge and views, and try to get a feeling for how those views are arising, so that within that context, we can start to discern, okay, is this view that I'm holding skillful or is it unskillful? Or how can I hold to this view in a way that doesn't make me feel defensive and angry and argue with other people? So at this point, I think I would like to mention another sutta that I've referenced before, I believe, with Anathapindika. And so Anathapindika was a householder in the time of the Buddha. He's not a monk, but he was a householder. And at one point, there's a sutta where he decides to go visit an assembly of other ascetics, other philosophers and spiritual teachers and practitioners. And they ask him, what is your view? What is your doctrine that you hold in the world? And Anathapindika says, oh, it would be very easy. It wouldn't be very difficult for me to describe that. How about instead you tell me what your views are? Right, so here we can learn something immediately. Anathapindika, he starts by listening. And he doesn't enter an assembly and immediately assert what he believes. He listens to what other people have to say. And so that's something that we can already take, right? Whenever someone says something, or whenever we're in a situation where there are different ideas floating around, we can take that opportunity to listen and notice that hearing, notice that listening faculty, and see maybe certain words we hear, they make us feel defensive or angry or happy, and agree with them. And notice this connection between our emotions, our feelings, and the words and the ideas that we hear, and how this connects, right? There's a deep connection, which gives other people power over us, right? Just by saying something, they make us feel a certain way. So that's not freedom. And so Anathapindika, he starts with listening, just gently listening. And each of these philosophers, they say their own view. So maybe one says that they think that the cosmos is infinite. Another one says, no, the cosmos is finite. Another one says that the soul and the body are the same thing. Another one says, no, the soul and the body are different things. So there's all these different views. And Anathapindika listens, and then they ask, well, okay, what is your view? And so this is where we get to see the Buddhist view, right? So maybe the Buddhist view is that, the cosmos is infinite, right? That's the Buddhist view. Or, the Buddhist view is that the soul and the body are separate things. And no, that's not what Anathapindika says. He doesn't say another view in this list, right? He says that his view is that all these other ideas, those are dependently originated. So there are certain causes and conditions which have given rise to people believing in that. And he says, but whatever has been created and dependently originated through causes and conditions, that's impermanent. And whatever is impermanent, that doesn't give lasting happiness. That doesn't give satisfaction. And it can be painful. It's dukkha. And he says, whatever is dukkha, not worth grasping onto, not worth holding. And they kind of get a little bit upset. And they say, well, that's also an opinion. And he says, basically, at that point, Anathapindika then says that, well, actually, that he has realized and he's been able to let go of different opinions through this practice. The idea here being that this is a view which leads to the relinquishment of other views, right? So instead of our view being a specific content, some kind of idea, the view is rather pragmatic. It's functional. It's the view that understands how different ideas and how suffering comes to be. And it understands how we can work with that in order to be free from it. So I hope that distinction is meaningful. I think that that's the most meaningful thing that I could say in this session here. So the difference between the Buddhist view or what we could just say is, what is the Buddha teaching? Is he's not teaching another doctrine that we should be clinging to. Instead, he's teaching how doctrines and views and opinions arise and how we can be free from that. So he's teaching the mechanism for being bound to opinions and ideas and feelings. He's not teaching another opinion or idea or feeling to grasp onto, right? So that's the distinction here. And there are other places in this collection where he says that, for example, that arahants don't hold any views. Here he says, a person who has given up all judgments creates no conflict in the world, right? And again, sometimes we talked about this before. Sometimes this can seem shocking, right? How can an arahant have no views, or how can they have no judgments? Don't they need to judge between right and wrong? And I think it's again, this is where it comes down to discerning the difference between judging among different opinions and understanding how opinions arise and cease, right? And so there's another sutta which is very famous, which I think we can mention here, and that's also relevant to your practice. And this is called the Bahya Sutta. So very well known. Maybe some of you know it. But I'll tell the story briefly. This is in the Odana. And the story goes something like this. There was a ascetic named Bahya of the bark cloth. So this was a philosopher, a kind of meditator ascetic, who was living a very austere life and practicing his own spirituality, his own meditation. And at a certain point, he believed that he was liberated. He thought that he was completely pure, completely free from suffering. And the story goes that at a certain point, he hears word that actually he might not be pure, he might not be liberated, but there's a person named the Buddha who he could go to and get instructions from. And he could learn from what is real liberation to kind of test. So Bahya, it's believed that he was maybe very close. He had a lot of meditation practice perhaps, but he wasn't quite there yet, but he thought he was. So he hears word and he decides to travel to the Buddha. So he goes to the Buddha, and the Buddha is actually on alms round. He's going through the town with his bowl. And Bahya goes up, he sees him, and he says, please give me a teaching. Please give me a teaching. And the Buddha says, this is not the right time, Bahya. we're on alms round right now. It's not a good time to give teachings. And Bahya is very insistent. So he asks again, please, no, I need a teaching now. And the Buddha says, now is not a good time. We're busy, maybe later. And Bahya, again, he insists that the Buddha give him instructions. And the Buddha, again, okay, he consents. So sometimes in the suttas, you have to ask 3 times if you really want something to happen. And so the Buddha consents. So this is just standing in alms round, so in the town, kind of busy, and Bahya has come up to the Buddha. And so the Buddha just gives him a brief teaching. He doesn't have time to give him a whole Dhamma talk for an hour. So he just gives him a brief teaching. And he says, okay, Bahya, this is how you should train. Dipte diptamattang bhavisate, sute suttamattang bhavisate, mute muttamattang bhavisate, vinyate vinyatamattang bhavisate, evan hite bahaya sikkitappa. So that's what he says. So maybe all of you are now enlightened, I don't know. But this means that in the scene, let there just be the scene. Right? So the idea being here that Bahya, he thought he was liberated, and so he probably held on to some kind of doctrine, some kind of view of purity. And the Buddha is saying, okay, don't think about that. Just observe what is actually happening. When there's seeing, there's just a conditioned arising of seeing. That's all. That's all that's happening. So just let it be that. Don't add on to it. Right? Then he says, sute suttamattang bhavisati. In the herd, just let there be the herd. So when you learn something, when you hear something, instead of getting entangled into it and assessing, I like this, I don't like that, and I am this and I'm that, or I'm the one hearing, or this person is bad, I'm superior, I'm inferior, they're much more learned. Just let there be the hearing. Just this process of hearing under certain conditions arising, and find freedom in that, right? We find freedom by letting go of entanglement in that process. Then he says, mute muttamattang bhavisati. So in the thinking, When we're thinking through ideas, we're thinking through rational thought and opinions and doctrines, or we're assessing ideas that we hear, we get entangled in that, right? We think that we're the ones who are thinking, and these are our opinions that we've built up over time, and we've spent all these years learning and developing our ideas of who we are and what is right in the world. And that entangles us. So the Buddha is teaching, mute mutta mutta bhavisiti. In the thinking, just understand the rising of that thinking. Don't get entangled, right? And then vinyate vinyata mattang bhavisiti. So even in this awareness itself, even in this deep knowing, this understanding, this faculty of knowing, just let there be that. Don't get entangled in it, right? There's just a process that gives rise to this knowing, this understanding, and we get wrapped up into that, right? And so the Buddha is saying, just let there be that. Just learn how that process arises. And he says that we should train this way. So this is a training, and this is something that we did in the beginning with our meditation, and this is something you can apply in your meditation as well, right? So whether it's just in daily life, when you see something, learn to sit with just that seeing, right? Learn to observe that process of the senses arising. And I'll pause here and say that when the Buddha says seeing, this actually, it kind of includes the other senses as well, okay? So in the Indian context, usually seeing it's kind of the primary example, right? And I think that most of us can relate to this. Most of us who are able to see, at least, is that seeing is really the primary way that most of us relate to the world. So when we see something, our experience of something is usually wrapped up in the sight of it, right? And then the other sense information that we receive, it's kind of built into the seeing, right? So seeing for the Indian context and for the Buddha, it really means all the senses. But hearing, listening, gets a very special place because of the Indian context, again, where hearing teachings in a tradition of memorization and learning and hearing is very important. So hearing is kind of given its own category. But when the Buddha says seeing, you can also take, for example, when you have food, for example, right? That process of tasting the food, this counts, we could say, as seeing, basically as perceiving sense information, right? Just through the daily faculties. And then hearing is when we learn information, we hear information, generally speaking, right? So just learning to sit with that process and observe your reactions, right? When you see something that you like, you see something you don't like, how does the mind react? Does it start saying, I like this, I don't like that, it should be like this, they don't know what they're doing, right? Those types of thinking? Or does the mind learn to understand how this entanglement with the world, liking and disliking and me and mine and theirs and right and wrong in terms of arguing, if we start to observe that process and find freedom from it, then we can see what the Buddha is talking about, right? Between forming a view and understanding how views arise. And then the same with teachings, right? When you hear a teaching, you might hear a teaching from certain monks and you don't like what that monk says and you like what this monk says. Or you might hear a teaching from your parents or your secular teachers or from people around you. Maybe someone tells you some crazy thing that you don't believe and you think that they're a little bit out there. But we don't want to judge. I'm superior, they're inferior. I'm inferior, they're superior. We don't form those judgments. We just observe that process and we try to find freedom, right? Which again, doesn't mean that we compromise our moral principles. That is a very important underlying foundation here. But those moral principles, we don't want to let those form the basis for arguing, disputing, quarreling, right? And then the same with thinking and knowing, and also with our observances, practices, and rituals, right? When we do rituals, if we find that they develop wholesome mental qualities, we can learn from that process and we can do those rituals. But we do not think that through doing rituals, we find purity, okay? We don't think that through rituals, we are better. We don't think that rituals are the answer, because that is not the case. So whether hearing, seeing, thinking, knowing, or rituals, all of those things, we learn the skillful application of them. Seeing people can be very important. We need to see people. We need to go visit teachers, right? We need to see inspiring things to develop our faith and to put ourselves into skillful situations. We need to hear teachings. We need to think about the Dhamma. We need to develop our awareness. We need to follow rituals and rules. Okay, we need to do all of these things. But what we don't want to do is misuse them, right? Like grabbing the snake by the tail and then it bites you, right? So we don't want to do that. So we want to understand these processes and use them skillfully instead of kind of blindly flowing with them. And so when the Buddha says the truth is one, another example that I wanted to give of this, which is kind of the opposite spectrum, is nowadays also very common and also referenced a little bit in this sutta, is maybe my truth, your truth, their truth, everybody's truth, right? Everybody is right. And there's many, many truths, and they're all equally valid. That's also a very common opinion. And here the Buddha is a little bit criticizing that idea, right? He's saying the truth is one, there is no second. So there is no my truth and your truth. There is just the way things work. There's just the truth. But we don't arrive at that truth through the normal means that most people think. That's the main distinction here. So the truth is not, again, some idea or doctrine. The truth for the Buddha is a pragmatic understanding that leads to freedom. It's a pragmatic understanding of how people believe in certain things and truths and how to find freedom from that. It's an applicable truth, right? The point of the Dhamma isn't just to know this is true, and because I know this information, I'm better. The point of the Dhamma is to find freedom, right? It's to find freedom. That is what truth is for the Buddha. So if someone has memorized the entire Buddhist canon, that is not the same thing as finding the truth in Buddhism, right? So finding the truth, this one truth, not many truths. It's not that this is right and that is right. It's that there is a way that things work, and there is a way to find freedom, and that is the way. Everything else is a matter of entanglement, arguing, disputing. And whether we use Buddhist ideas or Christian ideas or Jewish ideas or atheist ideas or conservative ideas or liberal ideas or any kind of ideas, if we use those to insist on truth, we're not looking in the right place, right? We look in the right place when we apply principles to find freedom by understanding our experience. And I think that for now, maybe we can turn to the questions. I think this is more kind of just a few general reflections and readings of some of the implications of the statements in this discourse that I thought were relevant, especially today with, again, so many ideas about, and so easy to think that we're superior or inferior to other people. And I think that it's also, just to sum up, very useful, again, to tie this into our meditation practice, into our mindfulness practice, right? To really tie in the Buddhist theory, Buddhist truth is not separate from reality. It's not an idea that we hold in the mind. Buddhist theory, Buddhist truth for the Buddha, it's something that allows us to find freedom, right? It allows us to let go even of our own ideas as being superior, even our own Buddhist ideas as making us better than other people. Even that we must let go of, right? And so learning to assess this and find some humility in what we know, right? Maybe we don't know that much, but we feel that we do. And so even that much, just knowing, oh, this is just views. This is just what I've been told since I was a child, and this is what I've believed. Even just learning to accept that and understand that can be very freeing, right? Very freeing to see, oh, I don't need to defend this and feel like I need to hold on tight to my ideas in the world. I can explore the mind. I can explore these opinions. I can listen to other people without arguing with them. I can empathize with them and develop compassion for how their views arise. And at the same time, I can uphold moral principles to find peace. I can uphold meditative principles to find peace. So they're not contradictory. And I think that is the main lesson, one of the main lessons that I pull from this, along with this phrase that the truth is one, right? That there's really one thing we're looking for. So we shouldn't get entangled in the net of views. We should look for pragmatic, practical truth. So I'll offer those reflections for today, and I'll go to questions. So if there's any questions here or online. I noticed some here. Nico asks, what is the name of the sutta? This is called the Shorter Discourse on Arrayed for Battle. It is the Chula Vyuha Sutta in the Atthakavagga, Sutta Nipata, chapter 4, Sutta number 12. And Sud asks a question. What is the feeling of purity and peace one feels when coming out of a good meditation or after, let's say, Buddhanussati meditation? Because it feels like there's something authentic there. Oh yeah, this is a really great question, right? So this feeling of the feelings of purity or peace that we can develop from meditation, is that something that's the Buddha is saying we should let go of? We could say yes and no, right? For most of us, no, we should not let go of that because if we're not finished with our practice yet, we need to develop peaceful meditation. We need to develop that feeling. But what we don't want to do is think that is the end, right? That is not the goal. That is just a feeling. Feelings are impermanent. Feelings are dependently originated. Feelings are nothing but sensation. That's all they are. But that doesn't mean that we don't develop them. For the Buddha, it's very important to discern these types of feelings. When I develop them, they make my mind more free and calm, and they lead me towards understanding. And these feelings, they just make me more cloudy and foggy and confused or in pain. And we need to discern between those feelings and develop the helpful feelings, the skillful feelings, like from Buddhanussati meditation, as you say. But we don't think, okay, this is it, right? Feeling peaceful from Buddhanussati is a really great thing, sadhu sadhu, but it's not the end of the path. That's all we need. So we don't stop developing it. We do develop it, but we don't settle, right? And we don't think that we're superior to others, and we don't argue with other people, right? So maybe someone else, for example, does Jesus Nusati. Maybe they recollect Jesus. Maybe they recollect their parents, or they recollect their friends, and they feel very pure. And you don't tell them, oh, no, that's wrong. You only need to think of the Buddha. Jesus is wrong. Only Buddha is right. Jesus Nusati is wrong. If they find purity and peace from that, we can also recognize that without needing to believe that everybody's religious ideas are right? We don't need to turn into that extreme, but we can recognize that there are many ways to develop peaceful feelings, and peaceful feelings are just peaceful feelings. They don't make us better than other people. They don't make other people better than us. I hope that makes sense. So we use them skillfully and we use them wisely, and we reflect on them to develop our wholesome qualities and develop our mind without getting entangled into thinking that this is the only truth. Only this is true. Everything else is wrong. That is the kind of idea that the Buddha said we should avoid. Okay. So I see a question here. General views are easy to realize, but how can we realize our views that are arising from the subconsciousness, which we cannot easily control or drop? Yes, this is another great question, right? Most of our views, they might not be very consciously chosen. They're just opinions. And the best way to recognize them, I would say, is by doing this process of observation, observing our mind, right? Observing our thinking process, our knowing process, our hearing and our seeing faculties, observing those and developing awareness of the reactions, right? Because we'll notice this. Someone puts the fork on the left side of the plate and we cringe because it should be on the right. And it turns out that that's just because we were scolded for doing that, or so. I'm just making this up, but there's can be these subconscious reactions when we see something, we don't like it. They did it the wrong way, but it's just a custom. It's just an observance, right? It's not the wrong way. It doesn't make them inferior people. They just did something else. So we can only know that if we actually reflect, right? Otherwise, throughout the day, we'll just have a stream of thoughts, of judgments and opinions and superiority and inferiority and arguing and disputing, and we'll never realize that because we don't reflect on those internal processes. So using our awareness to reflect how our sensory input creates feelings and craving and clinging. And then we draw a connection between them, right? When I hear this, I feel like that. So when I hear someone say this type of view, maybe I feel very happy. That means that probably there's a connection between them, right? And then we can start to observe that and discern, does this help me grow or does this make me more attached? Does this make me more defensive? Or we hear something and then it makes us feel very angry. And then we draw an inference from those two. And we say, oh, maybe there's something going on there. Maybe I can investigate that process to learn how to let go of that anger and just see how this process arises and passes, not worth getting involved in. So those are some ways that we can develop awareness of the subconscious. We have to develop our mindfulness. We have to develop our awareness. to see these subtle processes and to learn how to let go of them. Because it also takes time to learn, right? Maybe much of the time we learn, oh, I get angry or I get greedy or happy when I hear or see this, but we can't let go of it. It's not so easy, right? So we must observe it many, many times and understand the process of how it arises and how that is not, it's not personal. It's just a kind of conditioning process that we are influencing with our choices and intentions, but oftentimes we're not aware of how our choices are forming that. And so it takes awareness to see, oh, I'm just in the habit of fueling this attachment. So only through developing our mindfulness or awareness can we really change our behavior and change our choices, change our reactions. Okay, another question here. How to get along with friends who are nice and caring to you, but could be judgmental through their own views? I don't think I can directly request them to stop judging or change views, though. Yes, we can't do that either, right? This is also another thing. So the Buddha is teaching us how to let go of views, but that doesn't mean other people are going to let go of views, right? So part of the benefit of doing this practice, it's not just that we don't hold on to views, but it's that when other people do hold on to views, which they inevitably will, right? We learn not to get upset. We learn not to retaliate, kind of snap back or get defensive or offended. So it's also by understanding how views arise, we have more compassion for other people, right? Because we understand that they are feeling this peace and this security, this identity with these opinions and feelings, and that kind of shackles their mind to that. So when they say these things and they get very emphatic about these opinions that maybe they disagree with you about, we understand, oh, it's not because, there's a reason for this. There's a conditioning process for this, right? They're doing that because they're taking advantage of the feeling of safety that they get from holding on to their own ideas and defending them or arguing for them. So by developing our awareness of our own faults, we develop compassion for other people's views and opinions, right? Other people tell us something that to us, it seems like, wow, they're really opinionated. But then we understand, oh, that feature of them, it's not because they're inferior, it's because they're just suffering. They just want to be happy. They just want to be happy and they don't know exactly how. Like most of us don't know how, right? Perfectly. And so that's why they do this. And so instead we can listen to them with compassion, but we don't need to believe them and we don't need to give them an ear, right? This is another thing I think we can learn is that sometimes the reason people they do this is because they get a seat at what we could call the grown-ups table, right? We give people who are very opinionated, we give them a platform to share their opinions, and we tell them that their opinions are valid, right? But sometimes people might have very harmful opinions, and it might not be the right time or place to share those. And so we can also help them by skillfully redirecting without arguing, just the best way we can, skillfully redirecting, finding wholesome common ground and shifting topic, right? That's another strategy. But it takes time, it takes experimentation. Everybody is a little bit different, so hope that's helpful to some extent. And this asks, what does ascetic mean? Yeah, ascetic, it means someone who does spiritual practices, renunciation practices. So it's ASCETIC. It means someone who renounces things and does kind of more austere practices for spiritual purposes, generally speaking. Okay, we're almost out of time here. So Nico asks, is this one of the 10 fetters? Is it a defilement? Okay, so yes, views are a defilement. They're dipti is called the Pali word. Dipti means an opinion or a view or kind of commitment to ideas. It is a defilement. It's actually very common. So it's one of the ways that we grasp and cling. Upadana, ditupadana. It's also one of the underlying tendencies, the anusayas. It's one of the asavas, even in a list of 4 outflowings of the mind. And there's many other lists that we could give. But yes, ditthi, briefly speaking, it is a defilement. It is a view. It is a fetter. It's not in the list of 10 fetters per se, but there are, in the 10 fetters, there's Sakaya Ditti and also Silabbata Paramasa, and those are forms of this. They are forms of this. They are basically the same thing, more or less. Okay, Amaranta asks, relating to not hold in any view is related with anatta dukkha anicca. Developing this view and perspective is related and see things as they are. Yes, exactly. Yeah, we develop the view of anicca, independent origination, and dukkha and anatta. We develop that perspective in order to let us let go of the clinging to perspectives, clinging to views. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Okay, I think someone asks how to calm the mind. If you could please bring that to Monk Chat tonight. We'll have other off-topic questions. And that is the end of our questions online, and we're just about, we're out of time, actually. So I'll go ahead and close at this time. So I hope that you all have a good morning and a good practice. I hope that if you get in any quarrels or disputes with your family members, maybe July 4th about politics, that you can let those go, understand where they're coming from, and develop some peace in the heart. So at this time, I'll say goodbye to all of you and happy practicing, and have a good weekend. And if you would like to join us for Monk Chat tonight, that'll be at 7:30 p.m. Here on the Empty Cloud channel. And there are also weekend programs on Saturday, 6 to 7:30, and Sunday, 1 to 4. Information about that is on the website. So have a good day, everybody, and good practice.